The Wooden Horse. This is the tale of how the Greeks and Trojans became deadly enemies and battled for 10 long years, and how victory was finally won through a trick. The gods took sides, many men died, and a great city was burned, all for the sake of a woman, the most beautiful the world has ever seen. It began with a wedding. The sea nymph, Thetis, was to marry a mortal, Peleus, a prince of Thessaly. Zeus had arranged the marriage himself and invited all the gods to the feast. All except Eris, the goddess of discord, whose presence was not wanted. However, she came unmasked and without saying anything, tossed a golden apple into the midst of the guests and disappeared. Apple bore the words, "For the fairest." At once, the three most beautiful goddesses, Hera, Athene, and Aphrodite, tried to seize it, each claiming it was meant for her. A bitter quarrel broke out. Zeus declared that he would appoint an umpire who knew nothing of the quarrel. He chose a handsome shepherd boy named Paris, who tended his flock far away across the sea on the slopes of Mount Ida in Phrygia, not far from the great city of Troy. Hermes, carrying the apple, accompanied the goddess to Paris and told him to give the apple to the most beautiful. Before the astonished young man had time to decide, the goddesses began to offer bribes. Hera offered him power. If he chose her, he would rule over vast kingdoms. Athene offered him wisdom and victory. He would never be defeated in battle. Aphrodite promised love. She would give him to the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. Without hesitation, Paris gave Aphrodite the golden apple. The whole world knew of Helen's wondrous beauty. All the princes of Greece had been her suitors, ready to kill each other out of jealousy. To prevent bloodshed, her guardian had extorted a promise that if Helen freely chose one of them, the others would support him against anyone who challenged his right to be her husband. Helen had chosen Menelaus. The rage of Hera and Athene at being rejected knew no bounds. They became deadly enemies of Paris, while Aphrodite did her utmost to protect him. Paris was the son of Priam, king of Troy, who was now an old man with many sons and daughters. When Paris was born, it had been foretold that he would cause the ruin of his father's kingdom. To prevent this calamity, Priam had given orders that the baby should be left upon a hillside to die. But the infant Paris was found by a shepherd who rescued him and brought him up. Aphrodite now restored him to his family, and Priam, who had long repented of his action, received his son with joy. On the seashore outside the walls of Troy, Paris built a fine ship and under Aphrodite's protection set sail to find the reward she had promised him. King Menelaus, quite unsuspecting, made Paris welcome as an honored guest. After a few days, the king had to make a journey and left his wife to entertain the Trojan traveler. Then Paris easily persuaded Helen, who was under the spell of Aphrodite, to run away with him. He fled to his ship, and a favorable wind blew them swiftly across the sea to Troy. When it was known that a Trojan had seized and carried off the wife of King Menelaus, the Greeks were furiously angry and swore that she must be brought back. This was no easy matter, for the Trojans would not let her go, and they were secure within the strong walls of Troy. The anger of the Greeks might have cooled had it not been for their greatest warrior, King Agamemnon of Mycenae, the brother of Menelaus. He reminded the Greek leaders of the vow they had made to support Helen's husband. Now is the time, he urged, to honor that vow. The mightiest Greek kings and warriors, with all the armed followers they could raise, sailed in a huge fleet to attack Troy. Troy stood in a wide plain beside the sea. Priam had entrusted its defense to his eldest son Hector, a brave and honorable prince. Hector led the Trojans to the shore to prevent the Greeks landing, but so many men poured from the boats that the Trojans were forced, with heavy fighting, to retreat within the walls of Troy. They barred its massive gate. The triumphant Greeks encamped along the shore, but hopes of an easy victory proved false. For 9 long years, they besieged the city. For 9 years, the Trojans kept them. Many bloody battles were fought on the Trojan plain. In the 10th year, the Greek leaders began to quarrel, and men talked openly of going home. At a council of war, the cunning Odysseus, king of Ithaca, suggested a plan. We break our swords in vain against Troy's walls, he said. Be guided by me, and I will show you how the city may be taken. When the Trojan watchmen looked out from the city walls on the next day, Greek tents had vanished from the plain. No ships lay along the shore. The unbelievable had happened. The Greeks had given up and sailed for home. The news spread throughout the city, and men, women, and children streamed out of the gates rejoicing. On the shore, where the Greeks had camped, they found the strangest object: an enormous wooden horse. Its legs were like trees. Its huge head was beyond the reach of the tallest man. At once, the crowd began to argue over what this terrible object meant. It is an offering to the gods, said some. The Greeks have left it for Athene, who favors them. Let us take it into the city, cried others, and honor Athene with offerings to the horse, and turn the Greeks' own gift against them. Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon, who had come with his sons to beg the sea god to raise a storm and drown the Greek fleet, denounced the idea. Fools, said Laocoon. Do you not know Greek cunning? I fear them even when they leave us gifts. We must destroy the horse. And he hurled his spear at its wooden flank. Which reverberated with a hollow sound. At that moment, a Greek was discovered amongst the rocks, his hands bound behind him. To the Trojans' questions, he replied that the Greeks had indeed abandoned the siege and left. The horse was an offering to Athene to ensure a safe journey home. He, a condemned man, had been intended as a sacrifice, but he had escaped and hidden in the rocks. But why did the Greeks build so huge a horse, he was asked. To stop it entering Troy's gates with, the captive replied. To stop it entering Troy's gate, the captive replied. Our soothsayer warned that if the horse were brought into the city, Troy would enjoy the protection of the gods forever. While the people hesitated, a strange noise came from the sea, a sound like the boiling of the ocean, and 2 huge serpents emerged from the waves. Heavy coils of their bodies snaked across the shore to wrap themselves around Laocoon's sons. The horrified father went to their rescue, but was at once entrapped. All three were squeezed to death. The Trojans saw at once that some mighty god resented Laocoon's treatment of the horse. Their minds made up. They took down the stone lintel of the great gate to allow the horse to be hauled in. A great procession escorted the horse to the heart of the city, where the people garlanded it with flowers and danced and feasted and drank wine in its honor. When the happy Trojans finally slept, a trap door in the belly of the horse swung open and 50 armed Greeks dropped to the ground. Some raced to the gate, overcame the guards, and led in the Greek army, which under cover of darkness had sailed back from the headland where it had hidden. Others fired the town, which blazed all night. The unarmed Trojans were slaughtered and their women taken as slaves. Thus, by a trick, the long war ended in one night. Old Priam was killed, and Troy was utterly destroyed. Paris was dead, and Helen, for whose sake all this was done, shed not a single tear. She returned to Menelaus and sailed with him for Greece.